Have you ever held a memory so tightly you can still feel its shape in your hand? 10 years ago, I was holding one. I was sitting in the passenger seat of my son's car, my gnarled fingers tracing the stitches of the small bag on my lap. Inside was my whole life, or so I thought. My son David, he told me he was taking me to live with him. He said, "Mom, I want you close. It's my turn to take care of you." And I, like a fool blooming in the desert, I believed him. He was my blood, the boy I'd raised on soup and sacrifice. But the moment he turned onto that long gray road leading out of the city, my heart, this old tired heart of mine, started to beat a frightened little rhythm. He wouldn't look at me. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw set like a man going to a funeral. And then I saw it. A sign for the Willow Creek Shelter. It wasn't a home. It was a place for people with nowhere left to go. He pulled over. The silence was so loud it hurt my ears. He got out, took my bag from the back seat, and placed it on the cold sidewalk as if it were a bag of rubbish. "Just for a week, Mom," he said, his eyes fixed on a crack in the pavement. "I just need to get things sorted." I asked him, "David, what is this place? Why are we here?" But he was already getting back in the car. I watched him drive away. First, the brake lights glowed red. Then they disappeared. And then he was gone. That week he promised. It never came. It turned into months. Turned into years. I sat on a thin, cold mattress in that shelter, my heart feeling smaller than a dried pea. I thought the weight of that betrayal would be the thing that finally killed me. But I was wrong. Because yesterday I saw something that shook me far more than the day he drove away. Before I tell you what happened yesterday, before I tell you what I did when I saw my own son broken and begging on the street, I need to know. I need to know I'm not just talking to an empty room. Tell me, where are you watching from? Leave a comment, just say your city. And please subscribe. Because this story needs to be heard. That shelter, it wasn't just a building. It was a warehouse for forgotten people. The air smelled of bleach and lost hope. I slept in a room with other women, their stories whispered in the dark. Stories of children who didn't call, of families that dissolved like sugar in rain. I became one of them. Clara, the woman whose son sold her house and left her with a small bag and a broken heart. I kept my old mobile phone, the battery barely holding a charge, clinging to it like a life raft. I checked it 100 times a day. No calls. No messages. Not even a wrong number. It was as if I had never existed. The shame was a physical weight on my shoulders. How could I, Clara, who worked 2 jobs to put food in his belly, who walked miles to buy him his first proper pair of shoes, how could I have raised a man who could do this? The nights were the longest. I'd lie there, listening to the city, and I'd remember my little boy. The one who used to crawl into my bed during a thunderstorm, his small body trusting me to keep him safe. Where did that boy go? But hear me now, you cannot die from a broken heart. Not if you refuse to. One morning I looked at my reflection in the small, scratched mirror in the washroom. I saw my mother's eyes looking back at me, and I heard her voice clear as day. "Clara, a woman is like a tea bag. You don't know how strong she is until she's in hot water." And I was in boiling water. So I got up. I asked the shelter manager if I could help in the kitchen. I started by sweeping floors. Then I washed dishes, my old hands plunged into soapy water, scrubbing away the grime of other people's meals. I did it not because I had to, but because I had to do. Every swept floor was a sweep away from self-pity. Every clean plate was a piece of my own soul I was washing clean. I found I had a gift. I could take the leftover scraps, the sad-looking vegetables, the tough bits of meat, and I could turn them into something that warmed you from the inside out. The other residents, they'd tell me, "Clara, this soup, it tastes like home." And that was the first spark of light I'd felt in a very, very long time. That spark became a flame. I saved every penny, every coin I earned from my small jobs. Took years. Years of going to sleep with my bones aching, of waking up before the sun. But I was building something. Not for David. Not for anyone but myself. When a tiny rusty food cart came up for sale, I used every bit of my savings and bought it. It was mine. My hands had built nothing for so long, and now they had this. I called it Clara's hearth. I cooked the food of my childhood, the simple, hearty meals my own granny taught me to make. First people walked past. But then one man, a taxi driver with tired eyes, stopped for a bowl of stew. He came back the next day. And he brought a friend. Word spread. They didn't know my story. They just knew the food was made with something more than ingredients. It was made with resilience. That cart became a small cafe. And that cafe, by some miracle I still don't understand, became this. A proper restaurant. Clara's hearth. With a real kitchen and tables with cloths on them. When I held the keys to this place for the first time, I didn't feel joy. I felt a quiet, deep pride. I had been thrown away, but I had composted my own pain and grown a garden from it. Yesterday morning I was out front, checking the delivery of vegetables. The air was crisp. I was thinking about the day's specials. My mind was here in my present, in my kingdom of stainless steel and simmering pots. And then I saw him, a shape huddled by the restaurant's doorway, curled in on himself like a discarded leaf. A homeless man, shivering in clothes that were more whole than fabric. My heart, as it always does, softened. I always make sure my staff offer a warm meal to anyone who needs it. It's a rule of the house. I stepped closer to see if he was awake, if he was all right. "Excuse me, sir?" I said softly. He flinched as if expecting a shout or a kick. And then he slowly lifted his head. The world stopped. It was David. My David. But it wasn't. This man's eyes were hollowed out by hunger and despair. His face was gaunt, covered in a grimy beard. His hands, once so confident, trembled violently. He was a ghost of the man who had driven away in a clean, shiny car. Our eyes met. I saw the shock in his, the dawning, horrifying recognition. He wasn't just seeing his mother. He was seeing his mother, standing strong and clean, owning the very restaurant he was begging outside of. The shame that flooded his face was more profound than any anger I could have ever mustered. He tried to speak. His cracked lips moved. And then a whisper so broken it was barely audible. "Mom." That one word, after 10 years of silence, felt like a physical blow. I didn't speak. I just stood there, the successful restaurateur, and he, the broken son, crumpled at my feet. The past 10 years flashed between us. The cold shelter bed, the silent phone, the pride of this place I'd built. He tried to stand, but his legs failed him. He clutched at the wall, his whole body shaking with weakness. I have nowhere to go," he stammered, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. "No one." A part of me, the part that had cried alone for a decade, wanted to scream. It wanted to list every single hurt, every lonely night. But as I looked at him, this shattered, humiliated man, I realized something. Life had already punished him. Life had taken his pride, his comfort, his very humanity. He didn't need my anger. He was drowning in the consequences of his own. I didn't offer him my hand, but I didn't turn away. "Get up, David," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I led him inside, past my stunned staff. I sat him at a corner table. He couldn't stop trembling. I brought him a cup of warm water, and he spilled half of it, his hands shaking so badly. He whispered apologies to the tabletop. And then he talked. He told me everything. How he'd lost his job, how his so-called friends vanished, how the money he took from me evaporated. He said he'd seen my restaurant for weeks but was too ashamed to come in. He said seeing my name on the sign was the final crushing blow. He realized the mother he'd discarded hadn't just survived. She had thrived. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just begged not to be turned away. He looked at me with those desperate, hopeful eyes. The eyes of the little boy who thought his mom could fix anything. And I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to open my arms, to give him a room upstairs, to wipe away the last 10 years with a mother's love. But that would have been the cruelest thing I could do. If I rescued him, he would learn nothing. He would fall back into his old ways. The shelter had taught me that strength is earned, not given. Mercy is not about comfort. Sometimes true mercy is about giving someone the chance to earn their own respect back. So, I looked at my broken son and I made my decision. David, I said, you will not live with me. You will not be given special treatment. But you can work here. His face fell confused. You can start, I said, as a dishwasher. The same job I started with. No shortcuts. No easy path. Just hard, honest, humbling work. He was silent for a long moment, absorbing the weight of it. Then he nodded. Not with happiness but with a grim understanding. This was his path back. The only one left. This morning, he was at the back door before sunrise. He didn't look at me as a son, but as an employee to his boss. He walked to that sink, rolled up his sleeves and began to scrub. He's there now. His hands in the same soapy water mine were in a decade ago. He's learning. He's learning the weight of a day's work. He's learning the price of a warm meal. He's learning what it means to build yourself up from nothing. I watch him, not with vengeance in my heart, but with a grandmother's weary wisdom. He left me at a shelter, but life, in its strange circular way, brought him to my door. I didn't save him. I offered him a shovel. The rest is up to him. And sometimes that is the hardest and truest form of love. That first week I thought he might break. I'd watch him from the kitchen doorway, my arms crossed over my apron. David, my son who used to complain about taking out the rubbish, was now standing for hours, his hands plunged into scalding water, scrubbing burnt-on grease from sheet pans. His shoulders, once held so high with pride, were now permanently slumped in exhaustion. He'd wipe his face with the back of his wet wrist, leaving a smudge of soap suds on his cheek, and for a fleeting second, I'd see the little boy who'd come in from playing in the rain. But then he'd look up, see me watching, and his eyes would dart away, filled with a fresh wave of shame. He wasn't just washing dishes. He was scrubbing away the ghost of the man he used to be. My staff, my good, hard-working staff, they started to notice. Young Sarah, my head waitress with a heart of gold, came to me. Clara, she said, her voice gentle, that new dishwasher, he's so thin. I saw him looking at the leftover bread like he was afraid to ask. I simply nodded and told her the same rule applies to him as to everyone. A staff meal is served at the end of the shift, and not a minute before. Pain me, it truly did. A mother's instinct is to feed her child. But I had to be a teacher now, not just a mother. Hunger can be a powerful teacher. It teaches you the value of a full plate. At the end of his first week, I called him into my small office. I had a small envelope waiting. I placed it on the desk between us. Your wages, I said. He just stared at it. He didn't reach for it. It was as if that simple envelope contained all the weight of his betrayal. You earned it, I said, my voice softer than I intended. He finally picked it up, his fingers trembling. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded, a single sharp nod, and quickly left the room. I found out later from Sarah that he went straight to the grocer's and bought a new pair of socks and a toothbrush. The most basic things, but he bought them with his own hands. It was a start. It was a busy Friday night. The noise was overwhelming. A new young cook, flustered by the orders, shouted at David. Hurry up with those clean bowls, old man. Are you asleep back there? The entire kitchen went quiet for a beat. I saw David freeze, a clean bowl in his hand. The word old hung in the air like a poison. He was being spoken to the way he must have thought of me. I saw his knuckles turn white. He didn't look at the cook. He just took a deep, shaky breath, placed the bowl carefully on the rack and said, They're coming now. In that moment he didn't retaliate. He endured. And in enduring he grew. One night as I was locking up, a cold, drenching rain began to fall. I saw David pull the collar of his thin jacket up and start to walk away into the downpour. I knew where he was going. He slept in a hostel a few streets over. A place not much better than the shelter I'd been in. David, I called out. He turned, his face pale and wet in the streetlight. Every fiber of my being wanted to say, Come back. Sleep on the sofa. It's dry here. But I knew that sofa would become a crutch. So I simply handed him the large, black umbrella I kept by the door. "Take this," I said. "A sick dishwasher is a useless dishwasher." He took it, our fingers not touching. It wasn't shelter, but it was a small shield from the storm. A compromise with my own heart. He'd been working for a month when I heard it. He was in the pantry restocking and he was humming. It was a faint, broken thread of a sound, but I recognized it instantly. It was the lullaby I used to sing to him. "Hush now, my baby, be still now, don't cry." I stopped dead in the corridor, my hand flying to my chest. I hadn't heard that tune in over 40 years. The sound of it coming from him in this place was like a key turning in a lock deep inside me. It didn't open the door to forgiveness, not yet, but it let a sliver of light into a very dark room. He stopped as soon as he heard my footsteps. But he had remembered. He started to change. Not in big dramatic ways but in small sturdy ones. He began to arrive even earlier to help the morning baker with the prep. He learned how to unclog the sink without being asked. One afternoon I saw him showing young Liam, the newest busboy, how to carry 3 plates at once without dropping them. He was patient. He was kind. The hardness that greed had put in his eyes was slowly being worn away by the grindstone of simple, honest work. A tiny, stubborn seed of the man he was meant to be was starting to sprout through the cracked concrete of his past. One evening, after the last customer had left, he approached me. He was holding a small, slightly lopsided apple tart. I helped Marco, the pastry chef, with the peels," he stammered. "He let me use the scraps to make this. I remembered it was your favorite." He held it out like a peace offering, like a boy bringing his mother a dandelion. I looked at that tart. The pastry was a little thick, the slices uneven. It was the most beautiful thing I had seen in a decade. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. I simply took it and said, "Thank you, David." And that night, alone in my kitchen, I ate every last crumb. And it tasted like a beginning. The months turned, and the sharp edges of our new reality began to soften. Then, one quiet Tuesday, he found me going over the accounts. He stood quietly until I looked up. "Mom," he said, and the word didn't sound broken anymore, just careful. "I've saved a little money. The hostel is, well, I was wondering, would it be all right if I rented the small room above the garage?" My pen stilled. The room above the garage. It was close but not too close. It was independent. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking to be a tenant. He was asking for a chance to be near me on his own terms. I took the old brass key from its hook in the pantry. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. I walked out to the garage, David following a few steps behind, silent as a shadow. I unlocked the door to the little flat and stepped inside. It was dusty and smelled of old wood, but the morning sun was streaming through the window. I placed the key on the small table by the door. "Rent is due on the 1st, I said, my back to him. "You take care of your own meals. And you keep it clean." I heard him take a sharp, shaky breath. "I will, Mom. I promise." When I turned around, he wasn't looking at the room. He was looking at the key on the table, and for the first time since he returned, there was something in his eyes that looked like a future. The day he moved his few belongings in, I was in the main house watching from the window. Later that evening, I went to my own bedside table and opened the drawer. There, tucked under my handkerchiefs, was a small faded photograph. It was of me and David, taken on his 6th birthday. He was sitting on my lap, grinning a gap-toothed grin, my arms wrapped tightly around him. I had kept it hidden all these years because the pain was too great. I took it out now. I didn't put it on display, but I left it on top of the drawer where I could see it. A small, silent acknowledgement that the past, with all its pain, also held our joy. It's been a year now. A long, slow year of sun and rain. David still works in the restaurant, but he's not a dishwasher anymore. He's my assistant manager. He's good with the numbers, and the staff respect him because they saw him start from the bottom. He tends the little herb garden out back that he started himself. We don't talk about the lost years. Some wounds are too deep for words. We talk about the restaurant, the weather, a book he's reading. It's not the relationship we had. That one is gone, a beautiful, fragile thing he broke a long time ago. This is something new. Something grown from hard soil, watered with tears, and nurtured with difficult truths. It's stronger. It's quieter. He came back to me a shattered man, and together, piece by piece, we have built a new man. And this one, I think this one will last. The harvest is never easy, my dears, but it is always worth the wait. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are often slow. A quiet hum after the weekend storm. Sarah was telling a story about her cat getting stuck in a vase, her arms waving about. And then I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard in over a decade. A genuine, deep, unguarded laugh. It came from David. He was standing by the pass, a stack of menus in his hand, and his head was thrown back, his whole face transformed by it. The entire kitchen seemed to pause for a half-second, then carried on, but with a lighter air. That laugh didn't erase the past. It was more powerful than that. It built a small, sturdy bridge over it. I turned back to my ledger, a smile touching my own lips that I didn't have to force. Don't for a second think the path was smooth. There was a day I remember he suggested we change the supplier for our meat. He had charts, figures, it was a good business decision. But that old stubborn part of me, the part that had been abandoned, reared its head. I've used Henderson's for 20 years, I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. They were with me when no one else was. I saw the flash of understanding in his eyes. He wasn't just arguing about meat. He was bumping up against the fortress walls I had built around my heart. He simply nodded and said, "You're right, Mum. Loyalty matters." And in yielding, he showed a strength that arguing never could. The past has a way of knocking unannounced. A man came into the restaurant one afternoon, slick suit, too much cologne. An old friend of David's from his former life. He saw David, now strong and clean, and his face split into a wide false grin. "Davy, look at you. Come on, a bunch of us are heading out our treat. Leave the apron behind," he said, clapping David on the back. I held my breath from across the room. I saw David's posture stiffen. He looked at the man, then at the Clara's Hearth logo on his own shirt. He smiled, a polite, distant thing. "Thank you, but no," he said. "I have responsibilities here." And he turned back to his work. In that moment, he didn't just refuse a drink, he closed the door on a whole other life. My hands, you see, they get stiff now. The arthritis, it's the price of a lifetime of work. One morning, I was struggling to open a large jar of pickles for the lunch service. Before I could even call for help, David was there. He took the jar from me, but he didn't just open it. His hands, once so careless, now worked with a quiet confidence. He opened it without a word, but then he stayed. He took over the task, deftly slicing the pickles, his movements efficient and gentle. He didn't say, "You're too old for this." He didn't make a show of it. He just saw a need and filled it. It was the most profound apology I never heard. An apology spoken not with words, but with a jar of pickles. It was my birthday. I hadn't celebrated it in years. What was there to celebrate? Another year further from the life I'd known. Another year deeper into being alone. I came downstairs that morning, expecting nothing but the quiet of my own kitchen. But the restaurant was closed. And there at my usual table was David. And he had made breakfast. It was simple eggs, toast, tea, and slightly overcooked. But he had set the table. For two. He stood there, looking more nervous than I'd seen him in months. I thought, "Maybe we could have breakfast," he said. I sat down. We didn't talk much. We just ate. But the empty chair that had haunted me for 10 years, the one that screamed of his absence, was finally filled. The restaurant has its own life, its own stories. One evening, a regular, old Mr. Peterson was feeling poorly. He was a lonely man. David saw him shivering a little at his table. Without me asking, David brought him a blanket and a cup of hot tea on the house. He sat with him for a moment just talking. Later, Mr. Peterson grasped my hand as he left. "You have a good boy, Clara," he whispered, his eyes watery. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. David hadn't told him he was my son. He hadn't needed to. His character, the man he was becoming, told the story for him. And for the first time, it was a story I wasn't ashamed of. Life, my dears, is not about going back. You can't unbreak the vase. But you can fill it with new beautiful flowers. The anger, the sharp pain, it's gone. It didn't leave in a dramatic rush. It just slowly packed its bags and left, because there was no more room for it here. What grew in its place is this quiet understanding. This new relationship, built not on the memory of a little boy, but on the respect for the man he has chosen to become. It's stronger than what we had before, because it's been tested by fire. This restaurant, this hearth, it didn't just save me. Saved him too. And now we tend it together. We are not just mother and son anymore. We are partners. We are gardeners. And we are finally at peace. Thank you for tending this garden with me. Your kindness has been part of the water and the sun. Now go and tend to your own. Goodbye for now.